Welcome to Tarot Tips with Rachel. Today I'm going to be talking about the minor arcana. Today I'm really going to be talking about the minor arcana and tricks to help you memorize what each number kind of means, as well as what each suit kind of means. Because to me that's the trickiest part of tarot, is all of the memorization. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of what each number kind of symbolizes, first I'm going to talk about the suits and what they symbolize. The first suit I'm going to talk about is the suit that is cups, represented in my cards by a raven, but it can be represented any kind of way. The traditional tarot has it as probably just cups, but cups kind of represent emotions and relationships with people. The next suit I'm going to be talking about is coins. Coins are really exactly what they sound like, in that they're material wealth. They represent kind of the physical, grounded part of tarot, and that they're actual things. Most often money, obviously, because coins. Suit I'll be talking about is my personal favorite, because I am a creative and a writer, is wands. And that really represents the creative side of ideas, creating stuff like writing and artwork. Wand suit represents your creative flow and your creative ideas. The last suit I'll be talking about is the sword suit. I have a really hard time kind of understanding the sword suit, and that to me it's about logic and kind of uncomfortable truths. The swords are always there to show up and tell you the thing you need to hear but you don't want to hear. They're that uncomfortably honest friend. And the first number I'll be talking about is the one I've laid out in front of you, the ace. Ace is pretty easy to kind of generalize in that it's beginnings. Ace of Cups is symbolic of the beginning of a relationship, you just met somebody really cool. Ace of Wands is the beginning of a project, etc. It's really just beginning something, because, as an ace, it's the first one. The number 2 can really be summed up with the words duality and choice. The Two of Cups is kind of a new really close friend. Two of Coins means prioritizing something or the other, job versus having fun. And Two of Wands is when you start off with a creative idea and can really go one way or the other. That choice of Two of Swords is kind of choice making, and you are the one that has to make the choice here. Again, one of those uncomfortable truths that comes with the sword suit. 3 is kind of like a stable point. A lot of cards they have sort of amping up to a stable point. Every once in a while they'll stabilize. 3 is probably the first stable point. You've got some stuff down, but you're still at kind of the beginning. The 3 of Cups is kind of a party, your friends are all together, but it's still very much a beginning. 3 of Coins is kind of an accomplishment, yeah, you got stuff done. 3 of Wands is sort of that first checkpoint after you start a project. This comes to the exception of the 3 of Swords, which is not awesome. It's basically heartbreak and bad stuff. I guess it is sort of a milestone for the sword suit, in that here's the first uncomfortable truth you have to deal with. Things are bad. Okay, so the 4s are kind of the calm before the storm clouds. With a 4 of Cups, it means a relationship is sort of, there's something bad under the surface. The 4 of Coins is kind of this you being stingy with money card. 4 of Swords is kind of directly related to rest and exhaustion. So the exception to the calm before the storm kind of good card is the 4 of Wands. It's you're stable in your ideas, I guess, because creativity is sort of a fiery passion thing, that the calm before the storm, the storm would be good. But yeah, the rest of them are pretty negative. This leads us to 5s. The only really universal thing about 5s is that they're all kind of bad. 5 of Cups is the loss of a relationship. 5 of Coins is the loss of money. 5 of Swords is kind of winning, but at a great personal cost. 5 of Wands is getting sucked up into a creative whirlwind, where you don't really know what you're doing. 5s are generally pretty bad. They're also the midway point between the numbers, so it's kind of you've got the beginning of something and you've got your low point, and then it's really all uphill from here. 6, to contrast, is a much happier number. It's sort of a big achievement. It's another one of the stable ones where after you've gone through the tumultuousness of the 5, where you're kind of can look back on where you've come and where you have to go. Like Ace of Cups is sort of nostalgia, like looking back at your past relationships. Six of Coins is you're in a stable spot and you can afford to be like generous. Six of Wands is like, hey, I know where I'm going with this idea. Or Six of Swords is kind of like a retreat inward. You need to take some time for yourself. But again, with a suit as kind of unpleasant as the swords, like that's almost as good as it's gonna get. Sevens are actually quite similar to twos in that they represent choices, but whereas twos are sort of a duality in one thing or the other, seven is kind of like a multiple choice buffet. You've got a lot of options in front of you. For example, like the Seven of Cups is like presented with a whole bunch of relationship choices, like who you're going to prioritize over the other. Seven of Coins is kind of like the beginning of like a business venture. It's time to take a big leap. Seven of Wands is similar, creative wise, and the Seven of Swords is kind of like strategizing. So it's very much like this is the fine-tuned detail choices, not necessarily the first big leap. Eight is kind of like the last push in something, like where the point where you're kind of doubting yourself. I'm definitely at an 8 point in my life. The Eight of Coins is like looking back on relationships and kind of like figuring out what you want. Eight of Coins is kind of like really like working hard. Eight of Wands is like buckling down in creativity. And the Eight of Swords is kind of looking within yourself. So these are all very reflective of like, you're almost there. Is this what you want? Like this is eight of anything is kind of your last chance to pull away, or in some cases like your last chance to push forward. So it's really like the last pause before the end of something. To the nines. Nines are sort of like they can either be like the you're almost there, kick back and relax and sort of let the ending happen, or it represents like the last final like struggle to the end, like, and sort of not knowing where the ending is. Like, really depends. Like the happy looking cards right now are the Cups and Coins, so those are kind of like a good point in a relationship or like a good point in financial security, whereas the end, sort of near the end of a creative project, is always like the scramble to the finish, and the end of like something unpleasant is you always feeling kind of afraid. So like 9 is nearing the end, and kind of depending on what suit you get, what that means. And we end with 10. Appropriate, considering 10 is kind of the summarizing of the ending of things, whether that's a rich and full life full of different relationships and different connections, or the ending of having financial security and like even like an abundance of wealth and like materials. The end of a creative project where you finally feel completed the period on the last page. Or the Swords is kind of representative of the more tragic part of endings, and that something's over, for better or worse. Like, maybe it's not great, maybe it's not bad, but it is over, and there's something sort of sad about that. Again, most of the time, the hardest part of tarot is memorizing like what the cards mean. The second like hardest part is probably forming a narrative around those, but I'm not going to go into that right now. But yeah, I hope you learned a lot, and this hopefully sort of spikes your interest in tarot. One last final disclaimer: I don't believe that these cards have any sort of mystical power. Like, I am a skeptic to the end, but I do think it's fun to try to weave a narrative around symbols. It's kind of why I'm a writer. So I just think it's a fun thing to do. Kind of helps you make decisions if you need a push to do something.